I think we have seen that both parties have been campaigning for a long time through the media and through their events since the last election. And it's very good that both parties have come out with a manifesto that appears very centrist. So both parties have come to the middle and they're looking at some of the issues to try and reform it. And I think that's the competitive politics that we want. And that's why a two-party system is very important. However, the political violence and the type of racist statements that are coming out from some of the leaders must be condemned. We hope it doesn't raise the temperature so much that when it comes to elections that there will be violence. And I trust the Malaysian people that we are peaceful, we know that we are just going there and vote, and then we will respect any decision. That's the kind of democracy that we should be enjoying. That's the kind of democracy we should be upholding. Of course, there are questions as to who you should vote and how you should vote. I'm not really interested in who you should vote or who comes into power. I think what's more important is the criteria you should use to vote. Political party aside, you should look at issues and you should judge your member of parliament or adun according to his work in a particular area or constituency. And only Malaysia has come up with the Laporan Rakyat, which has a list of questions that you should ask yourself before you vote. So for example, have you heard your MP or adun speak about the environment, about freedom of expression? How are they dealing with the issues, for example, roads, drains, and how often do you see them? How often do they come to speak to you? Do they make decisions on their own or do they consult you? So these are some questions which we need to ask ourselves before we go to the ballot box. It's very important because Malaysia is growing as a country, and I think we are becoming more developed. We are becoming more progressive. We are more discerning. And these are the questions that every Malaysian should ask, every voter should ask before going to the ballot box. I think it depends on who you ask about these sex scandals. Obviously, if there are people using it to their advantage, then there may be a small demographic that will be taking advantage of it. It has become very polarized in Malaysia and it's become quite toxic because hardcore supporters from both coalitions, no matter what, will not criticize their own leaders. It's become blindly partisan. But the more important set of voters which I'm interested in is, of course, the first-time voters, those who are suddenly very politically aware, suddenly very keen on voting, understanding the importance to vote, and of course fence-sitters, the non-partisan who just want to have a better country. Those set of voters, of course, can go either way or even the third way, meaning you either spoil their vote or don't come to vote just as a matter of protest. And these voters, I think, in the urban areas can see through some of these issues by looking at core questions. Do we have free education when human rights demands of it? Do we feel that we can freely practice our religion and culture? Do we see whether there are open spaces for us to enjoy our parks, or are we just becoming another city which is full of bricks and high-rise buildings? So these are questions, I think, where people read a little bit more and they start to question themselves, ask themselves. Sex scandals, sex videos has become so commonplace, even all over the world, that I think it's much easier to ignore them than to actually take an interest in them. The online media and mainstream media, when you read both on the same day, it's as if we live in two different Malaysias. And we don't even know, who you can trust or which media you can trust. But what is very important is that the internet has democratized and equalized our country in the sense that there is no one monopoly of opinions and views anymore. And the internet media has to continue in the way that it has continued. Some of the information may still be wrong, some of the information may still be wayward, but at least you have that alternative voice. And one day I see the internet media and the internet actually becoming the mainstream media. In fact, for some people, that's the only thing that they read. So it's very important for our democracy, and that's why freedom of expression is so key, so fundamental to a working democracy, that the media, the internet media, must continue and cannot be regulated or shut down. I'm not into political analysis, but of course the sentiments, and it's quite surprising. I think everywhere we go, even when we are non-partisan and we really in our game shops do not talk about political parties or what they do and what they don't do. We look at the issues, we say that there's a structural problem, the constitution needs some reform. It's very surprising that many people are talking about a change in government. Change in government meaning actually is change in coalition running the government, because the government forever stays as a cabinet. So it's surprising that we hear a lot of people saying that, and then of course you ask deeper sometimes, people say, oh, we need a two-party system, or we just need a change for the sake of changing, or there are some issues. So even within that rubric, that group of people who say they want to change government, they themselves have different reasons, and we do not sometimes do enough to go deeper to ask what really are your reasons. Do you really know what you're saying when you say change the coalition that runs the government? So it's not so black or white when he says change government. And of course we have to look at what happens on that day. I'm personally very concerned because that there are a lot of different types of phantom voters on our electoral roll. That is really a concern. So no matter how much you do, even if you come out with a very high 90% voter turnout, with the rolls not being clean, it can be manipulated, and that's the real concern for our country. Yeah, of course, I'm very happy that the Barisan National Manifesto, and as well as some ministers or deputy ministers in the Barisan National Coalition, has towards the end of their tenure come out with some statements about structural reform. But it may be a bit too late because we've been asking for it. Human rights conventions, we need to sign up to the anti-racism convention, we need to sign up to civil political rights, the cultural rights conventions. We need to look at the constitution again. I seriously think that we have to, after 50 over years, look at the constitution for purposes of reform. I think the constitution which was drafted in 57 and then of course 63, it's 50 years after Sabah and Sarawak joined us, and that's a landmark. I think we should set up a royal commission to take statements and document problems that the people are facing for purposes of improving the constitution. Politicians, for a reason, and many of them actually do things or say things for the vote. A lot of us can see through it. I think that politicians should, for example, with some politicians on both sides, right, Saifuddin and even with people like Ali Wong, who you can see the sincerity, and some people cannot see the sincerity. You can say it, but your actions speak otherwise. And of course, you have ex-politicians who continue to speak as if they are in power, which is very disconcerting. You know, the divide and rule type of policy tries to be perpetuated. I think Malaysians have been smart enough, are now smarter, are braver, and are more discerning to realize that race and ethnicity have always been used to divide us so that a certain power elite can be in power. And I think it's time to change. So politicians on both sides of the divide must not look at things in terms of our ethnicity. We must look at our needs, and we must look and make all Malaysians, the 28 million of us, come together as one. Come out very early in the morning, immediately go and vote and do your job, and then of course go and do whatever you want to do after that. We are of course doing an election special night at Pusat Rakyat, so you're welcome to come, and we'll be playing political cards with a scorecard. If you do not want to be in any of the coalition camps, you can always camp with us. And of course, enjoy the first time, if you are a first time voter. Enjoy the charamas and the campaigns. You know, it's very, very exciting, very interesting, and I think that's the spirit that we want. NGOs that come out or are outsourced by both coalitions. So there are certain NGOs where you can see support, funding, the personalities are outsourced from the political parties. So obviously those NGOs are quite partisan. There are some NGOs who have taken a non-partisan position, and we just look at the issues. Fortunately or unfortunately, most of the time it's the Pakatan Rakyat coalition that jumps onto the bandwagon, meaning they adopt what the NGOs are saying because the NGOs have been successful in preaching to them or lobbying them. So when they adopt it and say the same things as some NGOs, then people try and match and say, oh, you are actually supporting Pakatan. I think it's propaganda when you say those things. We must look at what actually the work of the NGO is, what they have been saying, and political parties, of course, they will jump on it. And I think there are some NGOs which welcome Barisan National coalition to actually jump on those statements, because what it does is that it explodes a kind of discourse in society where politicians have slightly more media coverage, and then that issue comes up. So again, as I said, Malaysians are smarter. This tarnishing of NGOs, foreign funding, Jews and all that, I think people don't buy that anymore. We look more on the issues, and I think the coming general election, while we want it to be a vote on the issues, unfortunately will appear to be a vote on popularity and on maybe dissent, because the voice of the people, once every 5 years, people feel, oh, I can only voice it once every 5 years. I think, this is the most important thing. But in activism, we say, no, you must be an activist every day of your life. And I think that's important because people may get disillusioned after the GE. And our message here from the NGO's perspective is, do not get disillusioned, do not get disinterested. Continue with activism. There are tremendous platforms like Undi Malaysia, Lawyer Bureau, Pusat, which will continue the same work, whoever is in government, because the journey for the ultimate human rights nation is a long-term journey. I'm very afraid for the younger ones who may say, I voted this way, but I didn't get the way I want. And I think that's not the way. Some of the people who have been doing this kind of work, political activists, some of them politicians now, have been doing this for ages. So it's not a short-term thing. It's not merely just getting yourself out there, feeling happy that you voted. If you really can, are you really sincere about the country, about reform, to make the lives better for everyone, then you must continue your work after the GE.